Step into a world where your senses refuse to play by the rules. Imagine walking through a hallway that stretches and twists in ways your mind cannot map. Or staring at a staircase that loops back onto itself with no beginning and no end. These impossible objects are not merely optical illusions on paper. They exist as physical structures, sculptures, and designs that seem to defy the very fabric of geometry and logic. They challenge your brain's most basic assumptions about depth, perspective, and shape, forcing you to question whether reality is as stable as you think it is. Our minds are wired to interpret the three-dimensional world in consistent, predictable ways. Doors should lead somewhere. Stairs should ascend or descend. Bridges should connect 2 points. Yet, when confronted with impossible objects, our perception falters. A simple twist in perspective or a clever arrangement of angles can turn an ordinary staircase into an infinite loop, or a flat surface into a world that seems to fold in on itself. These creations reveal the limits of human vision and thought, exposing how easily our brains can be deceived by context and expectation. The fascination with impossible objects has deep roots, from the works of Mia Shear to modern 3D installations and virtual reality experiments. Artists and architects have embraced the challenge of building objects that should not exist, using mathematics, spatial design, and visual trickery to bring these paradoxes to life. Some of these designs are playful, inviting you to step inside and become part of the illusion, while others are unsettling, as if they're mocking the very rules that govern physical reality. In the next 3 hours, we'll journey through a collection of 25 mind-bending objects that actually exist. Creations that break logic, twist perception, and make the impossible feel strangely tangible. This is not just about visual tricks. It's a reminder that reality is shaped by how we perceive it. If a simple shift in angle can convince you of something that isn't real, what does that say about the rest of your world? Prepare to see through the cracks of normality, where geometry bends and the impossible becomes eerily possible. Imagine walking up a staircase that feels like it's taking you nowhere and everywhere at the same time. You place one foot after another, expecting to reach the top, but no matter how long you climb, you return to where you started without ever turning around. This is the essence of the self-folding Mobius stare, a structure so perplexing that it seems to exist outside the boundaries of ordinary geometry. Inspired by the Mobius strip, which has only one continuous surface and edge, this staircase loops endlessly on itself, folding reality into a paradox you can walk through. The Mobius concept isn't new. Mathematicians have studied it for centuries as a simple yet profound example of non-orientable surfaces. But to experience it physically, as a staircase, is to step into a space where logic collapses. Each step feels familiar, yet your mind begins to argue with your senses. You know that stairs have an up and a down, a start and an end. Here, those rules no longer apply. You can circle this structure for hours and never find a true destination, because it exists as a closed loop, like infinity compressed into a few feet of space. What makes the self-folding Mobius stare so disorienting is its refusal to obey the linear expectations of movement. In traditional architecture, stairs are symbols of progress. Each step leads to a higher floor, to advancement, to escape. In this case, they lead you nowhere except back to yourself. It's not just a visual trick, it's a philosophical statement. How often do we climb our own Mobius stairs in life, mistaking motion for progress? How often do we loop back to the same point while thinking we're moving forward? Artists who have constructed real-life versions of these stairs rely on optical illusions and precise angles to create the effect. From certain vantage points, it looks like a perfectly logical spiral or ascending staircase. But once you're inside it, the illusion shifts. Mirrors, angled steps, and hidden supports conspire to keep you trapped in an endless cycle. This creates not just confusion, but a kind of meditative unease. The realization that your perception of space can betray you in the simplest of ways. To stand on the self-folding Mobius stare is to experience infinity with your own body. You feel as though you're trapped in a loop of time and space, where every step forward is secretly a return to the beginning. It's mesmerizing and unsettling, forcing you to confront the question, if you can't trust the ground beneath, your feet, what can you trust at all? Step into a hallway where every wall feels like it's folding in on itself, where the corners seem to stretch both inward and outward at the same time. The inside-out hypercube corridor isn't just a mind-bending visual trick. It's a living, walkable puzzle that challenges the way we understand three-dimensional space. Inspired by the concept of a hypercube or tesseract, this structure is designed to represent a shadow of a four-dimensional object. Imagine a cube, then imagine it unfolding and folding again, not in the three dimensions we know, but in an extra, invisible dimension your brain cannot fully process. Now imagine walking through a corridor shaped like that dot at first glance. This corridor may seem like a regular hallway with clean lines and geometric patterns. But as you move forward, the angles shift in ways that make no logical sense. A wall that looks straight suddenly appears to twist and melt. Corners curve outward when they should fold in. Floors and ceilings blend together as if they're the same surface, and your depth perception starts to fail. It's like being trapped inside a shape that doesn't belong to our world. Yet you can feel its surfaces and walk its paths. The sensation of being inside this structure is profoundly disorienting. Human brains are built to navigate a world of predictable geometry, squares, rectangles, straight lines. The inside-out hypercube corridor breaks all of these expectations. It's as though the hallway is alive, breathing, and folding, constantly reintroducing you to the same spaces. But from reversed perspectives, you walk forward, but you might find yourself back at the starting point, as if the hallway itself has curled in on reality. Mathematicians describe a hypercube as an object with 8 cubic cells, extending beyond our normal dimensions. Artists and architects have used this idea to create installations that mimic the strange projections of a hypercube shadow. Walking through this corridor is like stepping into that shadow, a three-dimensional echo of something that cannot fully exist in our world. The walls seem to expand and contract, their surfaces reflecting light in ways that make them look inverted, as though the inside of the hallway is trying to be its own outside. The experience also has a psychological weight. Spending even a few minutes inside this corridor makes you doubt the reliability of your own senses. It's as if your mind is being tricked into perceiving an alternate reality, one where inside and outside are meaningless terms, and space itself is bending. The design forces you to ask unsettling questions. If a hallway can feel infinite, while remaining finite, is it really the space that's warped, or is it just your perception? The inside-out hypercube corridor doesn't simply exist as an artistic installation. It's a philosophical experiment in disguise. By walking through it, you're not just moving through a physical structure. You're exploring the boundaries of thought itself. It challenges you to imagine a dimension beyond what you can see, touch, or measure. It whispers the possibility that reality is far stranger than you've been led to believe. Imagine stepping into a narrow, wedge-shaped room where two mirrors face each other at sharp, calculated angles, creating an infinite maze of reflections. You take a single step forward and suddenly there are countless versions of you stretching into a horizonless void, each one slightly distorted, bending at impossible angles, trapped between worlds that do not seem to end. This is the endless mirror wedge, a space designed to overwhelm your senses with infinity, all compressed into a few square feet of physical reality. Mirrors, by nature, deceive. They give the illusion of depth where none exists, and when placed at the right angles, they create recursive tunnels of reflection. But the endless mirror wedge goes far beyond a funhouse trick. Its two converging mirrors create the sensation of walking into a corridor that narrows into eternity. Instead of just bouncing light back and forth, this setup produces a spiraling effect of reflections, where each duplicate of you seems to tilt, compress, and shift perspective as though the very geometry of space is breaking down. You're not just seeing infinite versions of yourself. You're seeing infinite worlds, each one collapsing inward like a deck of cards. Standing inside this wedge can be dizzying. The closer you move to the narrow end, the more distorted your own reflection becomes. At a certain point, your body seems to fold in on itself like a living optical illusion. The angles force your brain to misinterpret depth, making you feel as though you're both inside the reflection and outside of it at the same time. It's as if you're looking at a reality that is swallowing itself, endlessly folding space into a razor-thin line of light and shadow. The endless mirror wedge is more than an optical phenomenon. It's a philosophical experience. It makes you confront the unsettling reality of infinity. When you see yourself replicated 100 times, you start to wonder which version is the real you. Are you the first reflection, the last, or the one standing in the physical world? It raises questions about identity, existence, and how fragile our sense of self truly is. This installation has been built in art galleries and interactive spaces, often as a meditative trap for the mind. People stand inside for minutes, unable to look away, watching as their reflections ripple into oblivion. It's beautiful and eerie, like being caught between two dimensions where time and space no longer behave as expected. To experience the endless mirror wedge is to see infinity stare back at you, forcing you to ask, if reality is just one reflection among many, what happens when all those reflections agree that you're the illusion? Step inside a room that shouldn't exist, yet somehow does. The Twisted Klein Room is a real-world attempt to manifest the strange geometry of a Klein bottle, a surface with no inside or outside, no clear boundary between what's within and what's beyond. Imagine 4 walls that merge with the ceiling and floor in seamless, continuous loops, all twisting and blending into each other like a ribbon of space that refuses to end. You enter the room expecting a familiar box-shaped space, but instead, you're swallowed by a structure that feels alive, folding in ways your mind cannot fully map. A Klein bottle is a mathematical marvel. It's like a Mobius strip's mysterious cousin, existing as a single, continuous surface with no edges, no front or back. Normally, it cannot be built in the 3-dimensional space without intersecting itself. Yet, artists and architects have designed rooms inspired by its properties, twisting walls, bending corners, and sculpted surfaces that flow into each other as if the whole room were one endless loop of material. To stand in a twisted Klein room is to feel as though the very concept of inside is an illusion. Are you standing inside the room, or has the room curved itself around you, making you part of its surface? What makes the experience so disorienting is the way the room warps your sense of direction. A corner you expect to be sharp and solid instead curves gently, leading into a wall that loops into the ceiling. As you walk, your perception of left and right, up and down, begins to lose meaning. It feels as though the room is folding back into itself, pulling you through invisible loops. The more you move, the less certain you become of where you started. You could trace your hand along the walls, expecting to find a seam or an edge, but your hand will simply return to where it began, as if you've been walking on the surface of infinity. The Twisted Klein Room is both a physical construction and a mental trap. It forces you to confront the way we define space, by boundaries, by opposites, by orientation. This room dissolves all of those rules. You are no longer inside a space. You are moving along a single surface that contains everything. It feels like being caught in a dream where every door leads back to itself, and every wall is also the floor. Spending time inside the Twisted Klein Room can be unsettling, even for those who understand its mathematical origins. It has a way of distorting your sense of scale and perspective, making you feel both enclosed and exposed at the same time. The room seems to whisper an uncomfortable truth. Perhaps inside and outside are just labels we use to make sense of a reality that doesn't really care about our definitions. To stand in the Twisted Klein Room is to be reminded that our world is built on perceptions, and those perceptions are fragile. If a room can erase the line between interior and exterior, What else in life is just an illusion waiting to be untwisted? Picture a simple window well, a recessed space that lets light into a basement window. Now imagine that this small architectural feature behaves in ways that seem physically impossible. No matter how you approach it, climb down it, or look through it, you're trapped in an optical cycle that seems to lead nowhere and everywhere at once. The Assyrian window well is inspired by the mind-bending works of C. Escher, where staircases rise and fall simultaneously and water flows uphill. It is a real, walkable illusion that tricks not only your eyes but your entire sense of spatial logic. At first glance, the window well appears perfectly normal. You see steps leading down to the bottom where a small basement window sits, but as you descend, you realize that the steps don't behave as they should. They either appear to shrink beneath your feet or stretch out into impossible curves, leading you back to the place you started. In some constructions of this design, you can look through the window and see a version of yourself peering back. Not in a mirrored reflection, but from an angle that makes no sense in three-dimensional space. The Assyrian window well is a masterclass in forced perspective and cleverly disguised architectural tricks. Designers achieve this effect by warping the shape of the steps, tilting walls, and carefully controlling sightlines so that the human eye interprets the space incorrectly. From above, it looks like a simple, functional window, but step inside and the rules of perspective collapse. It feels as though gravity shifts, distances warp, and the familiar boundary between inside and outside twists in on itself. What makes the experience so surreal is its banality. Unlike a massive, obviously artistic installation, the Assyrian window well looks like an ordinary feature of a building, until you engage with it. That's when the subtle distortions reveal themselves. It's a reminder that even the most everyday spaces can become portals to impossible realities when perspective is manipulated with precision, psychologically. Being in the Assyrian window well creates a mix of fascination and unease. Your brain tries to reconcile what it sees with what it feels, but the two refuse to match. You're walking on solid steps, yet they appear to fold under your feet, looping endlessly in a cycle that shouldn't exist. It's as if you're trapped in a living drawing, caught between two conflicting versions of reality. To stand at the bottom of this structure and look up is to see a distorted sky framed by angles that don't align. It's both mesmerizing and disorienting, forcing you to consider how much of reality is simply the result of perspective. If a small architectural feature can convince you that up is down and down is up, what does that say about the larger world you live in? The Assyrian window well is not just an illusion. It's a playful, unsettling commentary on how fragile our sense of space really is. It reminds us that reality is not always as straightforward as we believe. Sometimes a window is not just a window. Sometimes it's a trap for the mind. Imagine walking into a simple hallway with two sharp corners, expecting nothing more than a turn to the left or right. But the moment you step inside, everything feels wrong. The floor tilts ever so slightly, but your body swears it's flat. A ball rolls upward along the wall. Water drips sideways instead of falling down. Welcome to the gravity-defying corner hall. A structure so cleverly engineered that it convinces you gravity itself has been rewritten. At first glance, this hall seems perfectly normal. A plain stretch of corridor with a couple of corners. Maybe a door at the end, but as soon as you step into the space, your senses go to war. The floor appears to slope at a mild angle, but when you drop an object, it doesn't roll the way you expect. You take a step forward, and your balance peels off as though your body is leaning against an invisible force. Every corner you turn, the effect becomes stronger until you start to wonder if the building itself is bending, or if your own sense of down has been corrupted. The secret lies in a masterful distortion of perspective and architecture. Much like the famed gravity hills or tilted rooms used in movie sets, the gravity-defying corner hall relies on carefully angled walls, slightly slanted floors, and disguised reference points to manipulate your brain's perception of verticality. Unlike typical optical illusions that only work from one angle, this hall is designed to trick you no matter where you stand. Whether you walk straight, turn a corner, or look back, the world around you appears to twist and stretch, creating a sensation that gravity is pulling sideways or even upward. This installation is not just a visual experience. It's a physical challenge. Your muscles tense as you try to walk naturally, your body fighting an invisible slant that doesn't actually exist. People often find themselves laughing nervously or grabbing the walls for balance, unsure if they're truly standing upright. It's a vivid reminder of how much our sense of stability depends on visual cues, and how easily those cues can betray us psychologically. The gravity-defying corner hall feels like a metaphor for uncertainty. You enter expecting a straightforward path, but what you get is a maze of shifting angles and warped expectations. It's unsettling to realize how quickly your brain's understanding of normal can be disrupted. It makes you question how many of your daily experiences rely on assumptions rather than truths that architecturally. Some versions of this hall have moving elements, panels that subtly rotate, creating changes in shadow and light that make the illusion even more powerful. Others rely solely on static design, but are built with obsessive precision to ensure that every line, every surface, conspires to trick the brain. To stand in the gravity-defying corner hall is to feel as though reality itself is fluid. You take a step forward and feel like you're walking uphill, only to turn a corner and feel weightless for a brief second. It's both thrilling and unnerving, as if the laws of physics have temporarily gone on vacation. In the end, the hall leaves you with one lingering thought. If gravity, the one force we trust without question, can be faked so convincingly, what else in your world might be an illusion? Imagine standing in front of a large frame, expecting it to display a simple three-dimensional shape, a cube, a tunnel, or perhaps a sculpture. But as you move closer, something strange happens. The shape appears to flip inside out. What once looked like it was protruding outward now looks like it's receding inward. And as you tilt your head or step to the side, the entire object seems to reverse itself again. This is the reversing depth frame, a paradoxical structure that toys with your depth perception so thoroughly that you start doubting whether in and out even mean anything. The reversing depth frame works by exploiting the brain's reliance on visual cues like shadows, perspective, and angles to interpret depth. Normally, our minds are exceptionally good at figuring out whether something is near or far, convex or concave. But this frame is designed to break those rules. Using carefully crafted surfaces, angled lighting, and intricate patterns, it creates an effect where your brain flips its interpretation back and forth. A hollow shape suddenly looks solid, and a flat surface seems to curve inward as though pulling you into its depths. What makes this structure so captivating is that it never stops changing. No matter how long you stare at it, the illusion doesn't settle into one stable interpretation. If anything, the longer you look, the more your mind wrestles with what it's seeing. You might even catch yourself blinking or shaking your head as if to reset your vision, but the effect persists, as though the frame itself is alive and shifting between two competing realities. From a psychological standpoint, the reversing depth frame taps into a fundamental vulnerability of human perception. Our brains evolved to process a world filled with consistent depth cues, sunlight casting shadows, objects appearing smaller as they move farther away. When these cues are manipulated or reversed, it creates a cognitive conflict that feels almost physical. Some people report a sensation of falling forward into the frame or being pushed back by it, even though it's completely static. Artists and designers have used this illusion in both galleries and public spaces to create interactive installations. It's a powerful reminder of how fragile our sense of reality can be. Stand on the left side of the frame, and the sculpture inside seems to bulge outward toward you. Walk slowly to the right, and suddenly it collapses inward like a sinkhole. It's not just art, It's a living challenge to your brain's assumptions about space and form. The reversing depth frame also invites deeper philosophical questions. If your mind can't even agree on whether something is concave or convex, how much of what you perceive as real is actually just a mental construct? Is the world around you as solid as it appears, or is it simply a collection of interpretations that can be flipped with the right tricks of perspective? To experience the reversing depth frame is to witness your own brain in conflict, a silent war between expectation and reality. It leaves you with the haunting realization that perception is not truth, but a fragile illusion ready to break with a single clever design. Imagine stepping through a doorway and expecting to enter the next room, only to find yourself walking back into the same place you just left. You turn around and walk through the doorway again, but somehow, impossibly, you end up in the same spot, as if the space between those two rooms has folded in on itself like a piece of paper being twisted. This is the non-Euclidean doorway loop, a physical embodiment of geometry gone rogue, where the simple act of crossing a threshold transforms into an endless cycle that mocks your sense of direction in the everyday world. A doorway is a transition. It leads you from one space to another, dividing here from there. But this structure erases that logic. Built using cunning spatial design and hidden angles, it creates the illusion of a continuous loop that traps you in a cycle of return. Step forward and you come back. Turn around and you're still inside. It feels as though the doorway has detached itself from reality and now serves as a passage not between rooms, but between two versions of the same place. The illusion is achieved through a combination of architectural trickery and perspective manipulation. Some versions use mirrored surfaces that subtly blend with the environment, creating the sensation that the doorway leads somewhere different, even though it doesn't. Others rely on rotating panels and curved hallways that subtly realign as you walk, fooling your brain into thinking you're covering new ground when you're really circling back. To the mind, the doorway appears normal. To the body, it's an infinite loop. Standing in a non-Euclidean doorway loop can quickly become unsettling. With each step, your sense of orientation unravels. It's not just that you're confused about which way to go, it's that the very idea of going somewhere loses meaning. The space feels alive, almost mischievous, as if it's deliberately bending reality to keep you trapped in its logic. You might start walking faster, thinking momentum will break the illusion. But the harder you try, the deeper the cycle feels. There's also something strangely hypnotic about the experience. Some people report feeling as though time itself slows down inside the loop, as if the repeated passage through the same threshold erases any sense of progress. You begin to feel detached from ordinary reality, like a character caught in a recursive dream that refuses to let you wake up. Philosophically, the non-Euclidean doorway loop is more than just an architectural curiosity. It's a metaphor for life cycles. How often do we think we're moving forward, only to find ourselves repeating the same patterns, returning to the same situations? This doorway captures that feeling in physical form, turning the abstract frustration of repetition into a tactile, lived experience. To step through this doorway is to question not just where you are, but how you define movement, direction, and progress. It leaves you with an eerie thought. What if all doorways are just illusions of escape, and every new room is just another version of the one you've already been living in? Picture a tall wooden ladder leaning gently against a wall, its rungs inviting you to climb upward. Now imagine taking hold of the first rung, lifting yourself up one step, and realizing that you are right back where you started, not at the bottom, not at the top, but in a strange, endless loop where every climb folds into itself. This is the impossible ladder circle, a structure that defies the basic logic of vertical ascent. No matter how hard you climb, you never truly rise. Because the ladder exists as a continuous loop of motion, the concept is inspired by the idea of an infinite cycle, like the Penrose stairs, but reimagined as a ladder. To the casual eye, the ladder seems straightforward, a vertical climb from ground to top. But hidden within its design is a seamless curve, cleverly disguised by perspective and structure. As you ascend, the ladder twists behind you, reconnecting. With its base, you don't notice it at first. The rungs feel familiar and the climb feels real. But after several steps, when you expect to be higher or closer to a top platform, you're met with the unsettling realization that you're exactly where you started. This isn't just a visual illusion. Physical versions of the impossible ladder. Circle use a combination of spiraling shapes and forced perspective to create the sensation of continuous climbing. The rungs are slightly angled and sized in ways that mimic the appearance of normal elevation, tricking your body's sense of progress. Mirrors or carefully hidden curves create the impression of height when, in reality, you are moving in a loop track that folds around itself like a Mobius strip. Climbing this ladder feels like an exercise in futility, and that's the point. With every step, you expect reward, progress, or a change in view. Instead, the surroundings shift just enough to convince you that progress is happening, while in truth, you're trapped in an eternal loop. It's both mesmerizing and maddening, a commentary on the human instinct to climb and achieve, even when the destination doesn't exist. From a psychological standpoint, the impossible ladder circle becomes a metaphor for endless striving. It mirrors the moments in life when you feel like you're working hard but not moving forward, the routines, habits, and cycles that lead us back to the same starting point. To experience this structure physically is to confront that feeling head on. Each step forces the question, am I climbing for progress or just climbing for the sake of climbing? Architecturally, it's a marvel of design. The ladder's curvature is subtle enough that it looks straight from almost every angle. Only when you step back and observe the entire shape from above can you see the hidden loop, a snake devouring its own tail, disguised as a tool of elevation. It's unsettling, but also oddly beautiful, because it reflects the circular patterns that underlie so much of existence. Climbing the impossible ladder circle leaves you with an eerie, almost philosophical aftertaste. It challenges the assumption that upward movement always leads somewhere meaningful. Sometimes it whispers, the act of climbing is the illusion itself, and the higher you think you're going, the deeper you're just looping back into the same point. Imagine walking toward a grand stone arch, expecting it to rise majestically over you, its curve leading your gaze skyward. Yet, as you step closer, something unsettling happens. The arch seems to reverse itself, collapsing inward as though the space behind it is protruding forward. It's as if the entire structure is turning itself inside out, refusing to behave like a solid, stable object. This is the inverted perspective arch, a physical paradox designed to warp depth and trick the mind into questioning what is truly near, far, concave, or convex at a distance. The arch looks perfectly ordinary. Its symmetry and craftsmanship appear flawless. But with every step you take toward it, your sense of depth begins to shift. Shadows and lines, so carefully carved into the stone or sculpted into metal, create a shifting optical illusion that flips your perception. What once appeared to bulge outward now looks as though it caved inward, like a tunnel collapsing in on itself. You're no longer sure whether you're approaching an archway or a hollowed-out void disguised as one. The illusion behind the inverted perspective arch relies on a combination of forced perspective and mathematically precise design. The surface of the arch isn't smooth and uniform. It's carved with subtle, almost imperceptible curves that manipulate how light and shadow fall across it. Your brain, wired to interpret depth based on these cues, falls for the trick every time. From one angle, the arch looks grand and towering. From another, it appears to turn itself inside out. The effect is strongest as you walk beneath it, where the ceiling seems to fold away from you, like the inside of a bowl that has suddenly become the outside. Walking under the arch can feel like stepping into a different dimension. As you move, the structure seems to shift and breathe, reversing itself with every glance. It feels alive, like it's not just a static piece of architecture, but a shape that's actively responding to your presence. Some installations of this design even use reflective metal or polished surfaces, enhancing the illusion with mirrored distortions that amplify the sensation of inversion. The psychological impact of the inverted perspective arch is profound. It's not just that you can't trust what you're seeing, it's that your brain begins to doubt its own logic. If a solid structure like an arch can appear to flip between inside and outside, what does that say about the reliability of all the forms you perceive in daily life? The arch becomes less of a decorative structure and more of a philosophical statement. Nothing is truly fixed. Not even the shapes you think you understand. Some artists and architects describe this arch as spatial mirror, because it reflects the instability of perception itself. Just as a mirror shows you an image that isn't physically present, the inverted perspective arch shows you a geometry that isn't really there. It invites you to question what's real. Is the curve in front of you protruding or retreating? Or does it exist in both states at once, waiting for your perspective to decide? To stand beneath this arch is to feel like space itself has become liquid, folding and unfolding with each step you take. It's beautiful, haunting, and strangely humbling, a reminder that the solid world around you is not as solid as you think. Imagine stepping onto a bridge that stretches toward the horizon. Its sleek structure promising a crossing from one point to another, but as you walk, something feels wrong. No matter how far you go, the end of the bridge never appears closer. The horizon, instead of receding, loops back on itself. You turn around, expecting to see the entrance behind you, but it's gone. It's as if the bridge has folded into an endless circle, creating a horizon that is both near and infinitely far away. This is the closed horizon bridge, a surreal structure that blurs the line between linear travel and circular entrapment. From a distance, the bridge appears perfectly normal. Its design is often sleek, modern, and mathematically precise, spanning across a body of water or an open valley. But once you step onto it, the illusion begins. The rails, beams, and even the path beneath your feet are angled in such a way that your sense of perspective is thrown into confusion. The vanishing point, that comforting destination in the distance, is deliberately manipulated to remain constant, no matter how far you walk. The result is a feeling of being trapped on a path that refuses to end, as though the horizon has been stitched into a perfect loop. The closed horizon bridge is not just an optical trick. It is an experience in spatial dissonance. Hidden curves, subtle slopes, and precisely arranged architectural elements combine to make the path ahead look like it stretches forever, while also looping you back toward your starting point without you noticing. In some versions of the structure, a combination of mirrors and light is used to amplify the illusion, creating reflections that mimic distance and depth. You could spend an hour walking and swear you've covered miles, only to find yourself within steps of where you began. Psychologically, this bridge is a metaphor for futile striving. We walk because we expect a destination, yet the closed horizon bridge offers none. Every step challenges your assumptions about progress, achievement, and movement. How often do we chase horizons in life? Goals that feel close but always seem to slip farther away. This structure brings that experience into sharp focus, trapping you in a physical loop that mirrors the loops of ambition and expectation. The unsettling nature of this bridge is balanced by its strange beauty. Standing at its midpoint, you feel suspended between infinite skies and endless water, as if the entire world is wrapped around the bridge's geometry. The horizon becomes not a distant line, but a circle, a boundaryless echo of the universe's curvature. It's a place where time feels slower, where you're both moving and standing still, where forward and backward blur into the same direction. Architects who design these bridges often see them as meditative experiences, rather than mere visual tricks. They encourage visitors to stop walking and simply observe the effect. The way the horizon curves inward like a dome, the way perspective collapses into itself. It's less about crossing and more about becoming part of the illusion, realizing that the bridge itself is the destination. To stand on the closed horizon bridge is to confront the strange reality that even the simplest journeys can be infinite. It leaves you with a haunting thought. What if the horizons we chase in space, in life and meaning, are never meant to be reached, but simply walked endlessly? Imagine stepping into a hallway that should be straightforward, but instead twists and coils like a serpent, leaving you disoriented with every turn. The gimbal-locked hallway spiral is a structure where motion and orientation are deliberately sabotaged by geometry. You begin to walk, expecting to reach the end in a few steps, but the path doubles back, folding on itself in a way that makes it feel as though you're walking inside a spinning mechanism that's stuck, a space trapped. In its own infinite rotation, the concept of gimbal lock comes from mechanical systems, where a set of rotating frames loses 1 degree of freedom and can no longer rotate smoothly in all directions. This paradoxical hallway borrows that principle and turns it into architecture. The spiral appears to loop upward or downward like a coil, but in reality, it traps you in a flat plane that keeps rotating your sense of forward and backward. After a few minutes inside, you can't tell if you're ascending, descending, or simply moving in place. The hallway's design uses a mixture of slanted walls, angled floors, and continuously curving ceilings to create the sensation of rotation. Every few steps, your horizon shifts slightly, not enough to feel like a sudden change, but enough that your brain begins to question its bearings. The angles are designed to cancel out natural orientation cues, leaving you feeling as if the entire hallway is spinning around you, while you remain stuck in the same loop of motion. It's not just disorienting, it's dizzying. Psychologically, the gimbal-locked hallway spiral plays with one of our deepest instincts, the need for stable direction. Humans rely heavily on a sense of vertical and horizontal orientation, the feeling that there is an up and a down. When this is removed or distorted, it triggers a sense of unease similar to motion sickness. Many who walk this spiral feel their balance waver, their steps faltering as though gravity itself is unreliable. From a design perspective, the spiral is both a work of art and a feat of engineering. Some installations are built using tilted frames that give the impression of a hallway leaning in on itself, while others incorporate moving panels or slowly rotating sections of floor. The spiral's curves are subtle yet relentless, ensuring that even when you think you've straightened out your path, you're already veering into another curve that traps you in the loop. The gimbal-locked hallway spiral isn't just about disorientation. It's a metaphor for moments in life where you feel stuck, unable to move in a true forward direction. It's about those cycles where every effort to progress only spins you deeper into the same patterns, where up and forward are illusions that depend entirely on perspective. Walking through this hallway becomes a philosophical experience, as much as a physical one, forcing you to ask, are you really moving ahead or just spinning in the same place over and over? To stand still inside the spiral is just as strange as walking through it. The walls seem to lean toward you like they're collapsing, while the floor feels like it's trying to roll beneath your feet. Light fixtures placed along the ceiling create further distortion by casting shadows that shift unnaturally with every step. The result is an environment that feels both mechanical and alive, like being inside a massive gear that's jammed, forever caught in an impossible rotation. By the time you exit the gimbal-locked hallway spiral, the normal world feels almost alien. Flat floors feel too flat, walls too straight. It's a reminder of how much our minds depend on familiar structures, and how easily those structures can be warped into something unrecognizable. It leaves you with an eerie thought. Perhaps our sense of stability is nothing more than a delicate agreement between our brain and the environment, an agreement that can be broken with just the right twist. Imagine standing in front of a staircase that appears normal, a simple flight of steps leading upward, promising a clear destination. But as you climb, something strange begins to happen. The steps curve slightly, then twist, and before you know it, you're moving along a path that loops back under itself, tying space into a knot. No matter which way you turn, the stairwell folds in unpredictable directions, as if it's constructed from impossible geometry. This is the anamorphic stairwell knot, a mind-bending structure where progress is an illusion. and every climb leads you right back to where you started. The magic of this paradox lies in anamorphosis, a design principle that relies on distorted perspectives. From certain angles, the staircase looks perfectly logical, almost ordinary, but as you move through it, the illusion breaks. Steps that appeared straight suddenly bend sideways. Landings overlap in ways that shouldn't be possible. What looked like an ascent turns into a descent without any clear point where the change occurred. It's like being caught inside a three-dimensional version of an Escher drawing, where direction and orientation refuse to obey the rules, walking through an anamorphic stairwell knot feels like a dream that doesn't make sense. You're climbing, but you don't feel higher. You turn a corner, but you see the same point you left just moments ago. The structure tricks your brain into perceiving movement where there is none, much like a treadmill for the mind. Even stopping doesn't bring clarity when you stand still. The angles around you create the sensation that the entire stairwell is shifting, sliding like a puzzle piece trying to snap into place. Psychologically, the experience can be both mesmerizing and frustrating. Stairs in our daily lives are symbols of progress. They lead us somewhere, to another floor, another view, another moment. But this knot refuses to offer that satisfaction. It's a looping journey that forces you to confront the unsettling possibility that not all paths have an endpoint. It's not just a staircase. It's a physical metaphor for all the times you felt stuck in life, endlessly climbing but never arriving. From an architectural standpoint, creating an anamorphic stairwell knot requires extraordinary precision. Builders use curved frames, overlapping landings, and hidden structural supports to give the illusion of logical movement, while ensuring that each twist feeds seamlessly into the next. Some versions even incorporate mirrored walls or tilted perspectives, enhancing the sense of infinite looping. It's as much a piece of interactive art as it is a staircase, meant not to transport you upward, but to challenge your understanding of what upward means. Standing in the center of this structure is surreal. Look up, and you'll see steps, folding into themselves, their angles merging like braided rope. Look down, and the same effect repeats, as if you're caught inside a knot of infinite staircases. The air feels heavy with a strange tension, as if gravity itself has been twisted to follow the strange geometry of the stairs. The deeper message of the anamorphic stairwell knot is clear. Progress is not always linear. Sometimes, what looks like forward movement is just a return to the same place, disguised by the illusion of motion. This realization can feel uncomfortable, even unsettling, but it's also strangely liberating. It reminds you that not every journey needs an end point. Sometimes the act of climbing, looping, and exploring the knot itself is the entire experience. To leave the anamorphic stairwell knot is to step back into the ordinary world of straight lines and predictable structures. Yet a part of you will remain tied to the memory of that impossible climb, a reminder that reality, like a staircase, can be twisted in ways that make even the simplest paths mysterious and infinite. Imagine walking into a quiet room where water flows in ways that feel deeply wrong. A thin stream cascades from a higher ledge to a lower pool, or at least that's what you think at first glance. But the longer you watch, the more you realize the water appears to flow upward, spiraling in a counterclockwise motion that seems to break every law of gravity. The counterclockwise waterfall rune is an installation designed to trick your senses so profoundly that you begin to doubt your own understanding of cause and effect. From a distance, the room seems ordinary. The sound of running water is soothing. The dim lighting reflects gently off the liquid surface, and everything feels calm. But as you step closer, the illusion takes hold. The water appears to spiral in the wrong direction, climbing rather than falling. It doesn't splash the way it should, and your brain begins scrambling for explanations. Is it a trick of the light? Are there hidden pumps forcing the water upward? Or is this room a pocket of reality where gravity simply runs in reverse? The illusion is created by a combination of carefully hidden mechanics and distorted perspective. The surface on which the water travels is tilted just enough to trick your brain when viewed from the designated vantage points. Add in subtle lighting and cleverly angled walls, and the water's flow seems completely unnatural. In some advanced versions of this installation, a spiral track is hidden beneath the surface, guiding the water in loops that mimic upward motion. The effect is so convincing that even when you're told it's a trick, your senses continue to insist that the water is defying gravity. Walking around the room only makes the effect stranger. From one angle, the water appears to flow upward. From another, it might appear frozen in time, as if locked in an eternal counterclockwise swirl. The sound of the water adds to the confusion. Your ears expect the noise of falling droplets, but the flow creates an odd, almost reverse sound, as if the room is echoing in backward time. Psychologically, the counterclockwise waterfall room is a test of perception. It forces you to confront the fact that your brain is not a perfect recorder of reality, but a storyteller. Your mind builds a narrative about what should happen. Water falls downward, spirals turn clockwise, and when that narrative is challenged, you feel a jolt of unease. This unease, however, quickly turns to fascination. People often find themselves staring at the water for long periods, hypnotized by its impossible movement. Philosophically, the room acts as a metaphor for moments in life where everything feels backward. Sometimes we push forward, expecting progress, only to feel as though we're moving in reverse. The water's strange flow is a reminder that direction is not always as fixed as we believe. Maybe up and down or just constructs of perspective, just as success and failure can feel reversed depending on where you stand. The architecture of the room amplifies this theme. Some versions feature reflective walls that create multiple illusions of water flowing in different directions, giving the impression that you are surrounded by 1,000 counterclockwise spirals. It's as though you've stepped into a space where time, motion, and perspective have all been untethered from the natural laws you rely on, leaving the counterclockwise. Waterfall room feels like waking from a strange dream. The normal world of downward waterfalls suddenly feels almost dull by comparison. And yet, as you walk away, you can't help but wonder, was it really just a trick? Or did you, for a moment, step into a corner of the universe where the rules bent and water flowed the wrong way? Picture a set of railway tracks disappearing into the distance. At first glance, everything looks normal. The parallel lines, the dark tunnel entrance, the promise of a path leading somewhere beyond. But as you approach the ambiguous tunnel, your eyes and brain begin to fight. The tracks appear to shift, either converging far too soon or splitting apart at impossible angles. The tunnel's entrance seems to grow smaller and larger at the same time, as though it can't decide if it's pulling you in or pushing you out. This is the ambiguous rail tunnel, a paradoxical structure that thrives on breaking the fundamental rules of perspective. From afar, the tunnel seems straightforward. It's constructed with rails, sleepers, and walls that mimic the familiar look of an old railway. But the illusion begins to unfold as you step closer and your viewing angle changes. The width of the tracks appears to oscillate. They may even seem to twist into curves that have no logical direction. In some installations, you can stand at one end and swear that the rails meet far too early, as though the tunnel is far shorter than it looks. Then take a few steps to the side and the rails suddenly stretch into impossible depth, as if the tunnel just grew twice as long. The secret to this paradox lies in the masterful manipulation of forced perspective. The rails are not truly parallel. They are angled and tapered in ways that confuse your sense of depth. The tunnel walls are also sculpted with subtle curves that make the entrance appear smaller from certain angles, creating the unsettling feeling that the tunnel is breathing, expanding and contracting as you move. Some versions of this structure even use mirrored surfaces and painted shadows to amplify the confusion, creating a tunnel that never appears the same way twice. Walking into the ambiguous Rail tunnel is like entering a dream where the geometry of space refuses to stay still. Your steps feel uncertain because you can't predict what the next few feet will look like. From one moment to the next, the tunnel might feel shallow, like you could reach the end in seconds, and then suddenly it stretches into an unreachable infinity. This constant shift between too close and too far is disorienting, making you question whether you're moving forward at all. Psychologically, this paradox is deeply symbolic. We rely on perspective, both literally and metaphorically, to make sense of the world. The ambiguous rail tunnel strips that comfort away. It's a physical manifestation of uncertainty, of life's moments when the path ahead feels both impossibly long and alarmingly short at the same time. Are you moving towards something meaningful, or are you trapped in a shifting illusion that keeps you walking but never arriving? The experience is made even more intense by the play of light and shadow within the tunnel. Dim lighting is often used to accentuate the forced perspective, causing your eyes to constantly adjust and misinterpret the angles. The result is a surreal experience where space feels fluid, where the tunnel seems to twist around you as though you are inside a living organism rather than a structure. Standing at the midpoint of this tunnel can be especially eerie. Look back, and the entrance you came through might appear impossibly small, as though it couldn't possibly fit a person. Look forward, and the exit may feel distant, like a fading mirage. Every direction feels uncertain, and your brain can't decide which way is real. It's a subtle reminder that our perception of reality is not a flawless truth, but a construction, one that can crumble under the weight of the right. Visual tricks thought to step out of the ambiguous rail tunnel is to feel an odd sense of relief, as if the solid world has returned to its usual form. Yet the memory lingers, and you can't shake the question, how many of the straight paths we trust in life are really just carefully crafted illusions, bending under the weight of our own perception? Imagine entering a perfect cube-shaped room, 4 walls, a floor, and a ceiling, all seemingly aligned with clean precision. At first glance, it looks ordinary, like an architectural exercise in symmetry. But then, as you step inside, the cube begins to betray you. Corners that should recede appear to bulge outward, while flat walls seem to warp and fold inward like a collapsing box. Every few steps, your sense of depth reverses entirely, as though the room cannot decide what's near and what's far. This is the depth-reversing cube chamber, a living paradox designed to turn space into a fluid, unpredictable illusion. The secret lies in the way the surfaces of the cube are constructed. While they appear flat and uniform, they are subtly warped and painted with gradients of shadow and color that disrupt your depth perception. Your brain relies on light and perspective to determine distance, but here, those cues have been carefully manipulated to give contradictory information. A wall that seems to be receding actually curves toward you, while a corner that looks convex is in reality concave. As you move, these illusions swap roles, creating the unsettling sensation that the room is flipping itself inside out. Stepping further into the chamber feels like being inside a visual puzzle that's constantly rewriting its own rules. No single viewpoint gives you the full truth. Stand in one corner, and the walls may seem to tilt inward like the inside of a pyramid. Move to another corner, and suddenly the ceiling feels closer, the floor farther, as if the cube itself has changed shape. It's as if the room is alive, breathing and stretching in response to your presence. This experience isn't just visual, it's deeply physical. Many people find themselves disoriented, even dizzy, after a few minutes inside. Your body instinctively tries to adjust to the tilted depth, leaning and shifting balance to compensate for distortions that don't really exist. The longer you stay, the more your sense of up, down, near, and far starts to dissolve. You feel like a figure trapped inside a folding mirror, unsure of what's solid and what's an illusion, psychologically. The depth-reversing cube chamber feels like a metaphor for uncertainty and shifting realities. We often trust our eyes more than anything else. We believe what we see. But inside this cube, your vision becomes unreliable, a trickster that feeds you conflicting information. It raises unsettling questions. If even something as simple as a cube can defy your understanding, what does that say about the rest of the world you see every day? Artists who create these chambers often incorporate dynamic lighting to amplify the effect. Soft lights positioned at odd angles cast shadows that don't align with the geometry you expect, making the walls look like they're moving. Some installations even use subtly rotating panels or mirrors that intensify the sense of depth reversal as you walk. Standing in the center of the cube is the most surreal part. No matter which direction you look, your brain flips between interpretations. Is the wall in front of you bulging or caving in? Is the floor sloping upward or downward? It's a constant battle between perception and reality, and neither side wins. Leaving the depth-reversing cube chamber feels like a mental reset. The normal world of consistent geometry suddenly feels like a relief. But the experience leaves a lasting impression, a reminder that reality, as we perceive it, is not a fixed truth, but a fragile interpretation. The cube whispers a question that lingers long after you leave. What if the solid structures of life are just shapes that change depending on where you stand? Imagine standing in front of a towering frame that appears to stretch toward infinity, its edges narrowing as they disappear into a vanishing point. At first, it feels like a portal, a doorway into endless space. But as you move closer, something strange begins to happen. The frame seems to fold in on itself, its edges converging yet never truly meeting. No matter how long you stare, the infinity feels trapped within the frame, looping endlessly like a mirage of depth that doesn't exist. This is the converging infinity frame, an architectural paradox designed to capture the sensation of chasing a horizon that forever slips away from one angle. The frame looks like a simple geometric arch or rectangular doorway, but its internal structure, combined with precise shadow work and reflective surfaces, creates the illusion of infinite depth. Mirrors line the inside edges, angled in a way that replicates the image over and over, producing an effect where the inside of the frame feels like a never-ending tunnel. Step closer and the frame seems to elongate further, as if you'll never reach the end. Step back and the infinity collapses, appearing shallow and unreachable, the most fascinating aspect of the convergent infinity frame is its refusal to let you pinpoint what's real. Your brain insists that there must be a path through the frame, that the depth you see must exist in physical space. Yet when you attempt to pass through, you're met with a flat, reflective surface that pulls you deeper into the illusion. It feels as though the frame is alive, mocking your sense of distance and direction. This paradox draws on the same psychological tricks that make infinity mirrors so hypnotic. By reflecting images between two or more surfaces, the illusion of infinite repetition is created, but here it's amplified by architectural design. The edges of the frame are slightly angled and sculpted to bend light in ways that disorient your depth perception. The result is a visual trap, a frame that promises endless space but delivers none. Walking around the structure doesn't break the illusion. It changes it. From the side, the frame warps into shapes that don't make sense, as though it's collapsing under the weight of its own impossible geometry. It's both captivating and eerie, a visual metaphor for chasing goals or dreams that always seem just out of reach, no matter how close you get. Psychologically, the converging infinity frame is an experience of frustration and awe combined. It forces you to confront the uncomfortable truth that what we see is not always what's real. Our minds crave closure, a beginning, an end, a clear boundary. But this frame refuses to give you any of those things. It is infinite and finite all at once. A contradiction you can see but never resolve. Standing at its center, staring into its false infinity, you may begin to feel something unsettling, a sense of being pulled inward as though your mind is being drawn into the endless tunnel it creates. It's an illusion, of course, but it feels real enough to make you take a step back, to reconsider your own perspective. The converging infinity frame is more than a piece of art or architecture. It's a statement about perception and desire. It reminds us that infinity, as we experience it, is often just an illusion, a product of mirrors, angles, and imagination. And yet, isn't that what life is? A series of frames we mistake for. Open doors, each one leading us deeper into the mystery of our own perspective. Imagine stepping into a long, narrow corridor that appears ordinary at first glance. The floor stretches ahead, the walls close in gently on either side, and the ceiling hovers steadily above. Yet, as soon as you start walking, something feels off. The ground beneath you tilts slightly, almost imperceptibly at first. Then, as you take more steps, the slope seems to shift again, but not in a predictable way. The perpetual tilt corridor is designed to create this sensation of constant imbalance, a hallway where no angle is ever truly stable, and every step makes you feel like you're leaning against gravity itself. The paradox of this corridor lies in its masterful manipulation of perspective and slope. While the corridor looks straight and level from the entrance, it's actually constructed with subtle, uneven gradients that throw your balance into confusion. One section might slope gently upward while the walls lean inward, creating the impression that you're climbing even when you're not. Then, just a few steps later, the angle seems to reverse, making you feel as though you're descending or tilting sideways. The shifts are carefully designed so that you can't quite figure out what's happening. Your body tells you one thing while your eyes insist on another dot. Adding to the illusion are strategically placed visual cues. The lines of the walls, the ceiling beams, and even the floor tiles are slightly angled, creating conflicting information for your brain to process. Some versions of the perpetual tilt corridor incorporate mirrors, amplifying the sensation that you're moving through a twisted, rotating space. As you move forward, your reflection might appear at odd angles, further convincing you that the corridor is slanting in ways that defy physics. Walking through this space is not just a visual experience. It's deeply physical. Your body instinctively adjusts to the perceived tilt, leaning and overcompensating, as if you were walking on the deck of a ship during a storm. Many visitors report feeling a strange mix of exhilaration and unease, their steps turning hesitant as the corridor plays tricks with their balance. The longer you walk, the more disoriented you become, as though gravity itself is alive and shifting under your feet. Psychologically, the perpetual tilt corridor is both fascinating and unsettling. Humans rely on stable reference points, flat floors, vertical walls, to navigate the world with confidence. When those references are distorted, your sense of orientation breaks down. It's not just that the corridor looks tilted. It feels tilted, triggering a visceral response. Your inner ear, which helps you maintain balance, begins to argue with your eyes, creating a sensation similar to mild vertigo. But beyond its physical effects, this corridor is also a metaphor for life's unpredictability. We often walk through life believing the ground beneath us is stable, that progress is a straight path. The perpetual tilt corridor reminds us that balance is fragile, that the terrain of reality can shift without warning. It forces you to confront the uncomfortable truth that even when everything appears level, it might just be an illusion waiting to tip you sideways. Architecturally, creating this experience requires meticulous planning. Builders use precise angles, often just a few degrees, to achieve the sense of that making the corridor visibly warped. Lighting plays a crucial role as well. Shadows are cast in ways that emphasize the illusion of slanting surfaces, while reflective elements trick the eye into misjudging depth and height. To walk through the perpetual tilt corridor is to experience reality as a fluid, shifting landscape. Every step is a negotiation between what you see and what you feel. By the time you exit, the normal world of flat floors and upright walls feels strangely reassuring, as though you've just returned from a place where the rules of physics were temporarily suspended, yet the memory lingers. You can't shake the thought. If something as simple as a corridor can manipulate your sense of balance and direction so thoroughly, How much of your perception of reality is just your brain agreeing with the lines it thinks it sees? Imagine standing in an open plaza bathed in sunlight, where every object casts a shadow as expected. But here, the shadows do not obey the same rules. Poles cast shadows in the wrong direction. Benches seem to have two overlapping silhouettes. And some areas of the ground are mysteriously darker than they should be, even when there's nothing above them. This is the Cross Shadows Plaza, a surreal architectural and lighting design that twists one of the most basic truths of our world. That light travels in straight lines and shadows should be predictable at first glance. The plaza seems completely normal. The paving stones are neat, the layout symmetrical, and objects within it, sculptures, lamps, pillars, are all positioned logically. But when you step into the center and start observing the shadows, confusion sets in. A lamppost might cast its shadow to the east, while another nearby object casts its shadow to the west, even though the same sun is shining over both. Some shadows might even cross each other, creating dark intersections where there should only be a single pattern of light and dark. The secret to this paradoxical design lies in the use of hidden light sources, carefully placed mirrors, and angled, reflective surfaces. While the sun provides the primary illumination, artificial lights are positioned to cast additional shadows in opposite directions. The mirrors and reflective panels amplify and redirect sunlight itself, creating overlapping shadows that look physically impossible. From certain vantage points, it can even appear as if an object has multiple shadows extending from it like the legs of a spider. Walking through the Cross Shadows Plaza is a disorienting experience, because your brain is wired to trust shadows as reliable indicators of where light is coming from. When those indicators fail, your sense of spatial awareness falters. You find yourself looking up, trying to spot hidden sources of light, yet the illusion is seamless. The sun might be high above you, but the shadows on the ground suggest that. There are multiple suns, each casting its own path of darkness. The psychological effect of this space is surprisingly profound. Shadows are something we rarely think about. They are constants, quiet reminders of our presence and the movement of time. When those shadows break their rules, it creates a feeling of unease, like stepping into a reality where the laws of nature have been quietly rewritten. It's not a jump scare or a loud disruption. It's subtle, creeping, and deeply surreal, philosophically. The Cross Shadows Plaza is a meditation on perception and certainty. If something as simple as a shadow can be manipulated to defy logic, how much of what we see every day is just a projection of light, interpreted by our brains in ways that we assume are real? It also evokes the unsettling idea that perhaps reality itself has multiple overlapping sources, just as the plaza's shadows suggest multiple suns. From a design standpoint, this installation is a marvel of both engineering and artistry. The positioning of every object and light source is calculated to the millimeter. The reflections have to be aligned perfectly so that the crossing shadows blend naturally, without revealing the trick behind them. When viewed from above, say from a nearby building, the entire plaza might look like a web of overlapping, intersecting lines, each one creating an impossible map of light and dark. Standing in the center of the plaza, surrounded by these unnatural shadows, can make you feel strangely weightless, as if you've stepped out of the real world and into a painting where perspective and light don't follow the rules. The shadows seem to reach for you, stretch past you, and converge in ways that feel intentional, as if the plaza itself is alive and watching by the time you leave the Cross Shadows Plaza. The ordinary world feels oddly straightforward. Its single, predictable shadows almost comforting. But you might also walk away with a deeper appreciation for how fragile your sense of reality is. If something as ordinary as a shadow can be turned into an impossible puzzle, what else might be? Quietly fooling your eyes? Imagine walking into a hall shaped like a triangle, expecting simple geometry, 3 walls, 3 corners, and clean, sharp angles. Yet, as you step inside, you discover that the angles are not what they seem. One corner looks far too wide, while another feels too narrow, and as you walk toward them, they shift in size as if they're being devoured by the very space around them. This is the angle-eating triangle hall, a place where geometry doesn't just play tricks on your eyes, but actively challenges the rules of Euclidean space. From the outside, the hall looks unremarkable, a standard triangular structure with equal sides. But once you're inside, perspective warps in ways that make the corners appear alive, bending and stretching as if they're consuming each other. When you look down one wall, the opposite corner appears impossibly small, almost like it's collapsing. Turn around and suddenly that same corner looks twice its original size, while the angles you just passed through appear to shrink or expand. It's as if the hall itself is breathing, rearranging its edges while you move. The illusion is achieved through careful architectural design. The walls are not perfectly straight, but slightly curved. Their angles deliberately skewed while being painted or patterned to mimic normal lines. These patterns confuse your brain's depth perception, making the hall seem like it is eating away at its own geometry. Even the floor tiles and ceiling beams are angled in subtle ways to amplify the effect, making the corners feel unstable and constantly shifting. Walking through the angle-eating triangle hall is both mesmerizing and unsettling. You might find yourself stopping in the middle of the room, staring at a corner that feels wrong, then stepping closer, only to watch it expand or contract as though it's reacting to your movement. From certain spots, two corners might appear to merge visually, making the hall look like it only has two sides instead of three. The closer you inspect the space, the more it refuses to stay consistent, psychologically. This paradox is a fascinating exploration of how easily the mind can be fooled by distorted reference points. We assume that a triangle will always have fixed angles adding up to 180 degrees, but here that assumption breaks down. It's not that the rules of geometry are violated, it's that the design manipulates our sense of scale and proportion so thoroughly that our perception becomes unreliable. The hall also has a strange emotional effect. There's something uncanny about being in a space that feels alive, as if its walls are bending in response to your presence. It's not just a static illusion, it's an interactive one where your movement changes how the space looks and feels. It's a reminder that perception is dynamic, constantly shifting with the angle from which you observe the world. Some versions of the angle-eating triangle hall are interactive art installations designed to challenge visitors' expectations of space. Artists incorporate dynamic lighting that casts shadows in ways that further warp the geometry, making the angles appear even more distorted. In some designs, the hall narrows slightly toward one end while widening toward the other, creating a forced perspective that makes one corner appear to consume the rest of the room as you approach it. Standing in the center of the hall is perhaps the most disorienting experience. From that vantage point, all three corners seem to fight for dominance, shifting in size and depth depending on where you focus. The walls, instead of being static boundaries, feel like they're curving inward or outward in an endless attempt to swallow each other. The angle triangle hall leaves you with a lingering thought. If something as simple as a triangle can be turned into a shifting, unstable experience, how much of the geometry of the real world is simply our brains' interpretation, waiting to be twisted by a clever design? Imagine stepping out onto a balcony, expecting to enjoy a view of the world below. The railings curve gently, the floor stretches outward, and you can see the landscape framed beautifully. But as you start to walk along the balcony, something strange happens. Instead of reaching the end and turning back, you find yourself looping back to the very spot where you started without ever making a visible turn. This is the topology bending balcony loop, a structure that warps space in such a way that outside and return become meaningless from the outside. This balcony looks like any other, a simple walkway projecting from the side of a building, with metal railings and a solid floor. But hidden within its design is a subtle twist inspired by the concept of a Mobius strip and non-Euclidean geometry. The floor is constructed in a continuous loop with a gradual rotation that is almost imperceptible to the eye. As you walk, you don't feel like you're turning, yet you end up back where you started, as if the balcony itself has no clear beginning or end. The experience of walking this balcony is profoundly disorienting. You step forward, expecting to reach an edge or a corner, but all you find is more of the same smooth railing. The same pattern of tiles, the same perspective of the building's wall. At first, you might think you're imagining it. Perhaps. You've turned slightly without noticing. But after several steps, it becomes clear. The balcony is looping on itself like an endless ribbon, trapping you in a cycle that makes forward and backward meaningless. The illusion is enhanced by clever architectural cues. The tiles on the floor are laid in repeating patterns that suggest a linear path, while the railings are curved in such a way that the twist of the balcony is hidden. In some installations, mirrored surfaces or angled panels are incorporated into the building's facade, creating reflections that mask the balcony's true structure. The result is a walkway that looks straight but behaves like a twisted loop. From a psychological standpoint, the topology-bending balcony loop is a direct challenge to our understanding of space. We think of balconies as simple extensions of a building, places to step out and see the world. But this one defies that expectation, creating a closed system where every step leads you back to yourself. It's a vivid metaphor for the loops of thought and action we often find ourselves trapped in, endlessly circling the same patterns. Even when we believe we're moving forward, the balcony also has a subtle, dreamlike quality. Standing on it, you feel both connected to the outside world and strangely isolated from it. The looping path makes it impossible to find an exit. So you begin to feel as though you're walking not on a physical structure, but on an abstract shape. A piece of geometry that belongs more to mathematics than to reality. The experience is both mesmerizing and unnerving, like being stuck inside a piece of architecture that refuses to follow the rules. Architecturally, constructing such a balcony is no small feat. It requires careful planning to create a looped structure that appears straight when viewed from the ground. In some cases, the balcony is built as a tilted spiral that wraps around itself, using the building's facade to hide the twist. In others, the loop is achieved through a combination of angled supports and mirrored panels that disguise the curvature. Standing in the middle of the topology-bending balcony loop, you might feel a wave of existential unease. It's not just about the physical loop, it's about the realization that progress is often an illusion. The balcony becomes a living metaphor. No matter how far you think you've walked, you may just be circling the same place, mistaking repetition for advancement. When you step off the balcony and back into the normal world, the ground beneath your feet feels reassuringly straightforward. Yet, the memory of that looping path lingers, whispering a quiet truth. Perhaps all the paths we walk in life, in thought, in time, are just loops in disguise, waiting for us to notice. Imagine a simple alcove carved into a wall, the kind you might see in old buildings, where shelves hold decorations or small lights cast warm glows. But here, when you step closer and peer into the wormhole wall alcove, something feels terribly wrong. The space inside doesn't seem shallow or confined. Instead, it stretches away into impossible depth, curving and bending as though you're staring into a tiny tunnel that could swallow the entire building. Take another step and the depth shifts again, collapsing into flatness or twisting sideways as if the alcove is a window to another dimension at first glance. This structure looks unremarkable, just a recessed niche set into the wall. But the illusion begins as soon as you shift your perspective. The alcove seems to stretch and fold, with no clear sense of where it begins or ends. Sometimes it appears to be just a few inches deep, and sometimes it feels like it's miles long, leading into a glowing tunnel of warped geometry. This constant shifting of depth makes it impossible to trust what you're seeing. The secret of the wormhole wall alcove lies in a mixture of warped surfaces, hidden mirrors, and expertly designed lighting. The interior surfaces are curved and angled in ways that defy your brain's expectations of symmetry. Subtle gradients of light create the illusion of depth where none exists, while mirrors are positioned to reflect and multiply certain features, giving the impression that the space extends far beyond the wall itself. From some angles, it appears as though you could crawl into the alcove and never find the end. From others, it snaps back into being a flat indentation dot. Walking around the alcove only intensifies the experience. As you move, the perspective shifts so dramatically that the shape seems to breathe and twist. It's as if the alcove is not a physical space, but a portal to somewhere else, a place where geometry no longer obeys the rules of the real world. This sense of infinite depth is both mesmerizing and unsettling, as though you're staring into the mouth of a miniature wormhole waiting to swallow you whole. Psychologically, the wormhole wall alcove is a test of perception humans rely on. Depth cues like shadows, parallel lines, and perspective to judge distance and size. Here, those cues are deliberately manipulated to create contradictions. Your brain tries to resolve what it sees. Is it deep or flat, curved or straight? But no single answer works. This creates a feeling of disorientation that borders on the surreal. Philosophically, this structure is more than just an optical illusion. It's a commentary on the hidden depths of reality. We assume walls are solid, that their boundaries define inside and outside. But the wormhole wall alcove plays with that assumption, suggesting that even something as ordinary as a wall might contain an infinite void just beyond our perception. It's a metaphor for the unseen spaces in life, the depths we never notice because we assume they're not there. Some versions of this alcove use dynamic lighting, with LEDs shifting in intensity and color to create the sensation that the tunnel inside is moving, expanding, or collapsing. This adds a temporal element to the illusion, making it feel alive, as though the alcove is constantly reshaping itself. Visitors often find themselves unable to look away, hypnotized by the idea that they're peering into something that shouldn't exist, standing directly in front of the wormhole. Wall alcove can even induce a strange feeling of vertigo. The space appears to pull your gaze inward, drawing you into its endless depth, as if your mind is trying to step beyond the wall. And yet, when you reach out and touch it, you feel nothing but a flat surface. That tactile contradiction, seeing infinite space where none exists, creates a moment of cognitive dissonance that stays with you long after you leave Dot to experience this alcove. To confront the limits of perception, it's a reminder that what we see is not always real, and that even the simplest spaces can contain impossible truths if we only look closely enough. Imagine stepping into a grand atrium, expecting a wide open space with staircases leading to upper levels. But as soon as you enter, something feels profoundly wrong. The staircases do not behave like normal staircases. Each one seems to invert itself in the presence of mirrors, as if the reflections are not reflections at all, but alternate realities. A staircase that appears to ascend in the mirror might actually descend in front of you, and as you climb, your reflection seems to take a different path altogether, leading somewhere that doesn't exist in your world. This is the mirror swapped staircase atrium, a labyrinth where your own image betrays you at every turn. At first, the atrium looks stunning. Polished marble floors, tall columns, and elegant staircases winding gracefully to the upper levels. Large mirrors line the walls, creating the illusion of vastness. But the moment you start climbing, your reflection begins to behave strangely. Instead of mimicking your movements, it might take a step in the opposite direction or continue climbing while you stop. From certain angles, the reflection of a staircase might appear to lead upward into an entirely new floor that doesn't exist, like a ghostly architecture conjured from light and trickery. The paradox is achieved through a clever combination of mirrored surfaces, tilted angles, and staircases designed with non-parallel lines. Some steps are slightly curved or distorted, creating visual inconsistencies when seen in reflection. The mirrors themselves are not placed perfectly flat. Instead, they are angled just enough to produce reflections that seem to stretch, twist, or detach from reality. As you move through the atrium, your mind is constantly trying to reconcile what's real with what's reversed. But the answer never becomes clear. Walking through the mirror-swapped staircase atrium feels like being inside a dream where your reflection has a will of its own. You might reach the top of a staircase only to see your reflection still climbing below, as if mocking your progress. In some installations, mirrors are arranged to create infinite loops of staircases, making it look like you're trapped in an Escher-inspired painting come to life. No matter which direction you take, the reflections conspire to create paths that don't exist, stairs that appear out of nowhere, and destinations that vanish when you approach them psychologically. This atrium is both mesmerizing and unsettling. Our reflections are deeply tied to our sense of identity and reality. We trust mirrors to show us the truth, to give us a consistent image of ourselves and the space we occupy. When that trust is broken, it creates a deep sense of unease. In the mirror-swapped staircase atrium, your reflection is no longer a passive copy of you. It's a distorted version, an alternate self living in a slightly different dimension where gravity and logic don't apply. The deeper philosophical message of this space is powerful. It asks, what if the you see in the mirror isn't really you at all? What if it's just one of many versions, a shadow of an identity that doesn't fully exist? By turning reflections into contradictions, the atrium forces you to question not just space, but SELFHOOD. Architecturally, creating such a paradox requires incredible precision. Designers use carefully calculated angles, hidden lighting, and overlapping staircases that align in unpredictable ways. In some versions, transparent panels and partially mirrored glass are used to create the sensation of multiple realities coexisting, your real body in one, your reflection in another. Standing at the center of this atrium, surrounded by these strange mirrored staircases, is a profoundly surreal experience. The reflections seem to pull you in, as though the mirrored world is trying to claim you. Looking into one mirror might show you a staircase that appears normal, while another mirror beside it reveals a version of that same staircase flipped, twisted, or leading into a void. It's a kaleidoscope of false realities, and you are caught in the middle dot by the time you leave the mirror-swapped staircase atrium. The normal reflections of the real world, a bathroom mirror, a shop window, feel almost comforting. Yet, a part of you can't help but wonder, was that reflection in the atrium just an illusion, or was it showing you a side of reality you never knew existed? Imagine stepping onto a bridge with beautifully carved railings, expecting to cross from one side to another in a simple, straightforward path. Yet, as you look down the length of the bridge, something begins to feel wrong. The railings themselves appear to repeat endlessly, each set of patterns containing smaller and smaller versions of the bridge you're standing on. It's as if the bridge has been copied inside itself, shrinking with every iteration, pulling your mind into a visual tunnel that never ends. This is the recursive railing bridge, a structure where reality folds into its own image over and over again, creating the illusion of infinite depth within a finite space dot at first glance. The bridge seems like a piece of fine architecture, with detailed railings featuring intricate designs, perhaps arches, curves, or geometric shapes. But the more closely you look, the more unsettling it becomes. Within the railings design, you notice tiny replicas of the bridge itself, complete, with miniature railings that also have their own smaller replicas, and so on. It's as if the structure is caught in an infinite feedback loop, each part reflecting the whole in a fractal pattern. The experience of walking across the recursive railing bridge is disorienting because your sense of scale begins to break down. As you move, the smaller versions of the bridge shift in perspective, making it feel like you're walking through multiple layers of reality at once. Look down, and you might swear that the miniature bridges inside the railings are also moving, stretching forward in perfect alignment with your steps. It's not just a visual trick. It feels as though you're part of an endless chain of bridges, each one nested inside the other like Russian dolls. The paradox is achieved through a combination OF fractal design and reflective materials. In some real-world installations, mirrors are used behind or within the railing patterns, creating the illusion that the smaller bridges extend infinitely into the distance. The designs themselves are carved or printed with mathematical precision, ensuring that each miniature version of the bridge matches the larger one perfectly. When combined with natural lighting, the effect becomes hypnotic, as though you're staring into an architectural infinity. Psychologically, the recursive railing bridge challenges your perception of boundaries. A bridge is meant to connect 2 points to create a sense of movement and completion. But here the journey feels endless, not because the bridge is long, but because its design suggests that you can never truly leave it. Each step feels like entering another layer of the same path, another echo of the same crossing. Philosophically, this paradox speaks to the recursive nature of existence itself. We often live in patterns, cycles of thought, behavior, and time that repeat endlessly, even when we believe we're progressing. Walking across this bridge becomes a metaphor for that experience. Every step forward is just another step inside a larger version of the same loop. The bridge becomes less of a structure and more of a reflection on how life often mirrors itself in smaller ways. Standing at the center of the recursive railing bridge can be overwhelming. Looking to the left or right, you see infinite layers of the same design, as if space itself is collapsing inward. Some visitors describe feeling as though they're shrinking into the miniature versions of the bridge, their minds pulled into the fractal tunnel of railings. It's both mesmerizing and unsettling, a quiet reminder that infinity can exist within the smallest details. From an engineering standpoint, building such a structure is a feat of precision. Every curve and line of the railing must be aligned perfectly to maintain the illusion. Lighting is also critical. The recursive effect depends on how shadows and highlights emphasize the repeating patterns. In some advanced installations, subtle projections are used to animate the smaller versions of the bridge, making them appear to ripple or shift as you walked out by the time you step off the recursive railing bridge. The normal world feels oddly simple. Its straight lines and solid boundaries almost too plain. Yet a part of you remains caught in the memory of that fractal journey, wondering if life itself is just another recursive bridge, one that never truly ends, but only repeats in smaller and larger loops. Imagine stepping into a peaceful courtyard, expecting open space, fresh air, and clear paths leading you from one archway to another. But here, no matter where you move, the layout of the courtyard doesn't seem to change. The paths remain locked in place, the walls and arches stubbornly maintaining the same shape and alignment. Even when you approach them from a different angle, it's as if the entire courtyard is a painting rather than a three-dimensional space, a scene frozen in, a single perspective, refusing to let you see it from any other viewpoint. This is the perspective-locked courtyard walk, a paradoxical environment where movement doesn't create new angles, but instead traps you in a single, unchanging frame of reality. At first glance, it feels ordinary, a rectangular courtyard, with stone pathways, a fountain at the center, and perfectly aligned arches along the edges. But as you begin to walk, something strange happens. Your position changes, yet your view does not. The arches do not distort as they should when you pass by. The fountain, no matter how far you walk, remains perfectly centered in your field of vision. Even when you try to look behind a column, the perspective remains the same, as if the courtyard is bending space to keep you inside a fixed viewpoint. The illusion is achieved using a combination of forced perspective, precisely angled walls, and subtle curvatures hidden within the design. The courtyard is not flat. Its surfaces are warped, curving inward and outward in ways your brain can't immediately detect. The ground may slope ever so slightly, while the walls are tilted just enough to cancel the depth cues that would normally change as you move. The result is a space that feels locked, holding you inside a visual illusion that seems to watch you, just as much as you watch it. Walking through this courtyard is like moving inside a painting, where perspective is fixed and unyielding. The usual thrill of discovering new angles is replaced by a sense of being trapped in visual stillness. No matter how far you walk, nothing shifts. It's as though the courtyard is designed to deny you any new information, looping your sense of space back onto itself. Psychologically, the perspective-locked courtyard walk creates a feeling of uncanny unease. We rely on perspective to prove that we are moving, to reassure ourselves that the world around us is real and dynamic. When that perspective is frozen, our brain panics, looking for changes that never come. It feels as if time itself has slowed or stopped, leaving you stranded in a scene that doesn't respond to your presence. Philosophically, this paradox can be read as a metaphor for moments when life feels stuck, when no matter how much you move or strive, nothing seems to change. The courtyard becomes a symbol of stagnation, of being locked into a single view of the world with no way to break free. It's not just an architectural illusion. It's a meditation on how easily we can become trapped in our own perceptions. From an artistic and engineering standpoint, creating this experience requires an almost obsessive attention to detail. The placement of every tile, arch, and column must be calculated so that from any angle, they align to preserve the illusion of stillness. In some installations, lighting is used to paint depth onto the walls, further reinforcing the sense that the courtyard is flat and static, even when it's not. Standing in the center of the courtyard is perhaps the strangest part of the experience. The fountain, arches, and paths all appear perfectly symmetrical, as though you're looking through the lens of a camera. Walk toward any corner, and the scene seems to stretch just enough to keep its composition intact, as if the courtyard itself is determined to remain in perfect balance. It's beautiful, eerie, and oddly claustrophobic. When you finally leave the perspective-locked courtyard walk, the real world, with its shifting angles and natural depth, feels like a relief. Yet the memory of the courtyard lingers, reminding how fragile perspective really is. It whispers a quiet question. How much of what we see is real, and how much is just a carefully locked frame of perception, waiting to be broken? After walking through these 25 impossible objects, from staircases that fold into infinity to courtyards that trap perspective, one truth becomes clear. Reality is not as rigid as we believe. These creations are more than just visual illusions or architectural curiosities. They are invitations to question the foundations of perception itself. We move through the world assuming that space is stable, that angles are trustworthy, and that our senses paint an accurate picture of what's real. But these objects reveal how fragile that picture truly is. Every impossible structure is a reminder that what we see is not a direct reflection of reality, but a carefully constructed interpretation our brains piece together from light, shadow, and context. A staircase can be endless if its angles trick the eye. A wall can hide a tunnel to infinity if mirrors are placed just so. A hallway can tilt, and suddenly gravity no longer feels like a reliable force. These illusions play with the very tools our minds use to understand the world, exposing just how easy it is to manipulate certainty. But beyond their ability to deceive, these objects are also deeply philosophical. Each paradox is a metaphor for endless striving, for cycles that repeat without progress, for the strange ways we get trapped in patterns of thought and behavior. The impossible ladder circle speaks to the futility of climbing toward goals that lead nowhere. The wormhole wall alcove suggests that there are infinite depths hidden in places we overlook. The mirror-swapped staircase atrium forces us to confront the unsettling idea that our reflections, our identities, might not be as solid as we think. There is also a strange beauty in their impossibility. These objects don't just defy logic. They create moments of wonder. They challenge us to see differently, to accept that even the most ordinary spaces can become extraordinary when perspective is shifted. In a way, they remind us that life itself is an illusion we navigate, a series of frames, patterns, and perceptions that we mistake for absolute reality. As we conclude this journey through 3 hours of impossible objects, Ask yourself, how many of the solid truths in your own life are really just perspectives waiting to be bent? Maybe the impossible isn't a limitation. Maybe it's an invitation to look closer, to think deeper, and to accept that reality is far stranger and far more flexible than we've been taught to believe.